We are moving on now to Psalm 83, which is the last of the Psalms of Asaph. A song, a psalm of Asaph. O God, do not be silent, do not hold aloof, do not be quiet, O God, for your enemies rage. Your foes assert themselves, they plot craftily against your people, take counsel against your treasured ones. They say, let us wipe them out as a nation. Israel's name will be mentioned no more. Unanimous in their counsel, they have made an alliance against you. The clans of Edom and the Ishmaelites, Moab and the Hagrites, Gaval, Ammon, and Amalek, Philistia with all the inhabitants of Tyre. Assyria too joins forces with them. They give support to the sons of Lot, Selah. Deal with them as you did with Midian, with Sisera, with Yavin at the brook Kishon, who were destroyed at Endor, who became dung for the field. Treat their great men like Oreb and Zeev, all their princes like Zevach and Salmunah, who said, let us take the meadows of God as our possession. Oh my God, make them like thistledown, like stubble driven by the wind. As a fire burns a forest, as flames scorch the hills, pursue them with your tempest, terrify them with your storm, cover their faces with shame, so that they may seek your name, O Lord. May they be frustrated and terrified, disgraced and doomed forever. May they know that your name, yours alone, is the Lord, supreme over all the earth. So starting off, let's just put it out there that the psalmist does really care about all the nations. Even the enemies of God and God's people will find a change of heart and eventually turn their way back towards the Lord. But that is really not the focus of the psalm. The psalm instead is focused on the enemies of Israel. And he says that the enemies of Israel are actually God's enemies, that in setting themselves up against the people Israel, these enemies are in effect setting themselves against God, because Israel is considered to be God's people, and anyone who would become enemies of Israel and try to destroy them would naturally and automatically be counted as enemies of God. And why is it that people do such things? Why would the Moabites and the Hagrites and the Philistines and the Midianites be so dead set against the people Israel? Is it possible that they were threatened by them, that they felt that as long as Israel existed and wielded any power, that that would constitute an existential threat to these other nations? Does it have to do with ancient forms of anti-Semitism that have continued throughout the centuries? People who have decided that the very existence of Jews is a threat to them and represents evil in their midst that would have to be eradicated. Is the very presence of Jews in their minds a threat by its very nature, something that they feel that they cannot live with? And that, of course, is a deeply irrational paranoia and fear. So, desperate people do desperate things. And a clue to that theme is found in our very psalm here because of the reference not only to Yishmael, to the older brother of Isaac, who would become the father of the Arab peoples, but also the reference to the Moabites in particular. because of the mention of the Bnei Lot, the sons of Lot. And so I would like to just take a little digression and read for you the story, the end of the story of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis chapter 20. After the cities of the plain had been destroyed, Lot went up from Zoar and settled in the hill country with his 2 daughters, for he was afraid to dwell in Zoar. And he and his 2 daughters lived in a cave. This, of course, was after Lot's wife looked back at the cities and the destruction and was turned into a pillar of salt. And the older one said to the younger, "Our father is old, and there is not a man on earth to consort with us in the way of all the world. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and let us lie with him, that we may maintain life through our father." That night they made their father drink wine, and the older one went in and lay with her father. He did not know when she lay down or when she rose. That's because he was in a drunken blackout, and he was basically unconscious. The next day the older daughter said to the younger, "See, I lay with father last night. Let us make him drink wine tonight also, and you go and lie with him, that we may maintain life through our father." That night also they made their father drink wine, and the younger one went and lay with him, and he did not know when she lay down or when she rose. Thus the 2 daughters of Lot came to be with child by their father. The older one bore a son and named him Moab. He is the father of the Moabites of today. And the younger one also bore a son, and she named him Ben-Ami. He is the father of the Ammonites of today. Desperate people can do desperate things. Lot turned to alcohol to numb his pain after the destruction of the life that he had known in Sodom, in the land of Sodom. His daughters, thinking that the destruction of those cities amounted to the destruction of the entire world, felt that it was upon them to perpetuate and maintain the human species by getting their father drunk and having sexual relations with him, incestuous relations with him, so that there could be a human race continued, a desperate act. Their children would become the Moabites and the Ammonites, 2 of the enemies of the Israelite nation, who are specified and mentioned in the psalm that I just read for you today, Psalm 83. And so, the enemies of Israel are represented as desperate people, as people who have enmity in their hearts for no rational reason. And therefore, the psalmist prays, of course, for their demise. This theme of desperation and desperate acts carries through today, of course, as we try to learn to struggle with the challenges of the pandemic as it exists and as it dominates our world today. And out of desperation, it would be easy and natural for us to let down our guard, to be reckless, to pretend that this virus is simply going to go away on its own, and to, instead of wearing masks, washing our hands, avoiding gatherings and parties and social situations, it would be very easy for us to become too relaxed and, out of desperation, to forget how unsafe it is or can be in the world where a pandemic is raging. Therefore, it is up to us, unlike the enemies of Israel, who became Israel's and God's enemies because of irrational and desperate thinking, it is up to us to think rationally and responsibly, to exercise patience, to remember that this will not last forever, that there are things that we can do to maintain and foster public safety and safety within our own homes, and to know that in time, someday, this too shall pass. And when it does, and when we can resume some kind of normal life, Then, like the psalmist, we will be able to raise our voices in joyous psalm and song and celebration together as we continue to struggle through these difficult days together. Someday we will celebrate the end of these difficult times together. Thank you.